The atmosphere was oppressive, with heavy clouds moving silently like an unseen battalion across the hills. Distant thunder echoed, shaking the compacted earth of the modest homestead. Blaze stood motionless in the enclosure, his gaze unwavering toward the far horizon. He was more than just a horse. He embodied a forgotten hero. Now, his coat bore the marks of countless battles, and his spirit seemed shattered, leaving behind only an eerie stillness. No one dared approach him. Suddenly, the low roar of an engine pierced the melancholic air. An old, worn-out truck, covered in grime, slowly crept up the gravel driveway. Inside the vehicle, Marcus Lee, a 35-year-old man, gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, his eyes fixed ahead but his thoughts lost in the past. He hadn't returned to this ranch in years, not since everything fell apart, his military unit, his sense of self, and his life as he knew it. Yet here he was, driven back by the bond he shared with Blaze. As Marcus exited the truck, rain began to pour in heavy, relentless sheets, soaking the cap he wore to conceal his graying hair. He moved toward the enclosure with deliberate, weighted steps, each one seeming to carry the weight of his unresolved past. There stood Blaze, his old companion, the horse who had saved Marcus's life numerous times. But Blaze's eyes met Marcus's with a vacant, hollow stare, striking Marcus deeply. "Blaze," he whispered, his voice barely audible, eyes brimming with emotion. He reached out, hoping for a familiar touch, but Blaze remained still. Instead, the horse took a few steps backward, emitting a soft neigh, as if seeing Marcus for the first time. A lump formed in Marcus's throat. He knew this reunion would be challenging, but he hadn't anticipated Blaze's distant demeanor. Watching from afar, Emma, a young ranch hand, observed the scene with caution. She approached hesitantly. "He doesn't trust easily," she remarked softly, her eyes fixed on Marcus. "Especially men. Something happened to him." Marcus glanced at her but remained silent, fully aware of the invisible scars they both carried. The rain intensified, drumming harder against the ranch as Marcus stood there, breathing heavily. He turned back to Blaze, whispering more to himself than to the horse, "I can't let you down again." The downpour enveloped the ranch, transforming the ground into a muddy expanse and casting the fences into stark, dark silhouettes against the tumultuous sky. Marcus remained frozen, staring at Blaze with a blend of sorrow and resolve. He longed to believe that Blaze still recognized him, but the horse's wary eyes suggested otherwise. A part of Marcus wondered if redemption was beyond reach for both of them, if their struggle was doomed before it even started. Memories surged within Marcus, transporting him to a night reminiscent of this one but set in a vastly different environment. The scorching desert, muffled cries, and the constant barrage of gunfire piercing the night. Blaze had been there, eyes wild and body soaked in sweat, steadfast by Marcus's side. Together, they had endured unimaginable dangers, forging a bond that now felt severed by time and trauma. "You're not like this," Marcus murmured, as if Blaze could comprehend. His voice quivered with unspoken guilt. "I let you down, and everyone else." He took a step back, running a hand through his rain-soaked face, unsure if it was the rain or his tears. Emma, still watching, took a cautious step forward but halted upon seeing Marcus's haunted expression, a man burdened with more than he could bear. Blaze let out a soft neigh, almost a groan, piercing Marcus in a way words never could. He understood that Blaze was tormented just as he was, both ensnared in an unending cycle of trauma. Perhaps this was why fate had brought them back together, two survivors attempting to navigate the wreckage of their pasts. The storm raged on, the wind whipping around them like a constant reminder of the chaos they once faced. Yet, Marcus refused to retreat. "I'll make you remember," he declared more firmly this time, his eyes locked on Blaze with a determination he hadn't felt in years. Even if Blaze didn't recognize him now, Marcus knew deep down that their connection still existed. He just needed to uncover it before it was too late. As dawn broke the next day, the sky was clear and cold, but the tension at the ranch remained palpable. Marcus had spent the night in one of the small lodgings intended for temporary workers, yet sleep eluded him. He lay on the rigid bed, staring at the wooden ceiling as vivid flashes of his past overwhelmed him. The screams of soldiers, the thunder of explosions, and the sight of Blaze racing alongside him through the chaos of battle. It all felt both distant and intensely real. At sunrise, Marcus made his way to the pen. Blaze was in the same spot, standing still like a sentinel, gazing into the distance. The horse hadn't moved to approach the fence, not even when Emma offered fresh feed and water. It was as though Blaze was perpetually on edge, unable to find peace. Marcus immediately recognized the look. It mirrored his own feelings. "I understand what you're going through," he murmured, leaning against the fence, his voice laden with emotion. "That feeling of being stuck, like you're still there, even though everything else has changed." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "I didn't leave it behind, Blaze. It seems you haven't either." Emma, who had been observing from a distance while tending to the hay, finally approached. "You seem to have a deep connection with this horse," she noted softly, her curiosity piqued. Marcus met her gaze for a moment before replying. "He saved my life more times than I can count." There was a weight to his words that didn't go unnoticed by the young woman. Before she could delve deeper, Marcus looked away, choosing not to discuss it, not yet. Determined to try a different approach, Marcus stepped into the pen with slow, deliberate movements. Blaze perked up his ears, alert but didn't react. Marcus knelt down to meet Blaze at eye level. "Do you remember?" he asked, his voice shaky. "The fields, the long nights, me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather piece, the gear Blaze had worn during their time in combat. Upon seeing the item, Blaze's eyes briefly sparkled with recognition, only to return to their usual emptiness. Marcus felt a sharp pang in his chest, realizing that perhaps Blaze was attempting to forget, just as he had unsuccessfully tried to do. Under the bright midday sun, neither Marcus nor Blaze seemed affected by the heat. They stood locked in a silent standoff. Marcus held the leather piece as if it were a key to unlocking hidden memories, but Blaze's steadfast gaze remained unyielding, like an impenetrable barrier. Frustration welled up within Marcus as he took a few steps back, running his hands through his disheveled hair. The weight of disappointment grew heavier. He had hoped that this small token would bridge the gap between them, but he now understood that Blaze's trauma ran deeper than he had ever imagined, perhaps even deeper than his own. "I just need a sign, kid," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with exhaustion and pain. Emma watched from afar, feigning busyness with ranch duties, yet her eyes remained fixed on their interaction. There was something profoundly intriguing about their silent connection. Finally, she mustered the courage to speak. "You know this isn't going to be easy, right?" she said, crossing her arms. "He has more scars than any other horse here. Maybe some things can't be fixed." Marcus stared back at her, his eyes burning with determination. "He's not beyond repair," he insisted, his voice stronger than he intended. "I've seen what he's capable of. I've witnessed the heart he has that doesn't simply vanish." He took another step toward Blaze, but this time, he didn't force anything. Instead, he stood quietly, allowing Blaze to sense his presence. Then, something subtle happened. Blaze slightly turned his head as if recognizing Marcus for the first time. It was a barely noticeable movement, but to Marcus, it felt like a significant breakthrough, a small fissure in the wall that had long separated them. Blaze's slight movement was like a breath of hope for Marcus. He stayed still, not making any sudden gestures that might disrupt the fragile moment. The surrounding silence grew heavier, broken only by the gentle rustling of the nearby trees. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a sense of companionship in the invisible burden they both bore. Blaze tilted his ears slightly towards Marcus, yet remained tense. He neither advanced nor withdrew, but that minor gesture was more significant than Marcus had anticipated after days of striving to reconnect. "You're still here, aren't you, boy?" Marcus asked softly, as if speaking to an old friend. His voice carried a vulnerability he rarely displayed. Emma, observing the scene, slowly approached with a bucket of water in hand. She paused a few steps away, careful not to disrupt the moment. "I've never seen him react like this," she said quietly. "Maybe you really mean something to him." Her voice was tinged with doubt, yet also curiosity. Emma didn't fully grasp the depth of Marcus's bond with Blaze, but she began to understand that it was something extraordinary. Marcus started to comprehend that their connection was beyond the ordinary. He sighed, still focused on Blaze. "He saved me when no one else could," he began, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We were trapped in a valley, surrounded on all sides. I thought it was the end, but he didn't hesitate. He faced the fire, the smoke, and pulled me out." He paused, glancing at the ground before continuing. "I promised him I'd never abandon him, but that's exactly what I did." The confession hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Blaze moved his head again, as if something in Marcus's voice rang familiar. The horse took a tentative step forward, his hoofs sinking into the soft earth. Marcus couldn't help but smile, a shy smile filled with hope and regret. He knew this small step was just the beginning, but it was a start. The sound of hooves against the ground brought a fleeting sense of relief to Marcus's heart. Blaze took another step toward him, but then hesitated, as if something unseen was still holding him back. The horse lowered his head, eyes fixed on the ground, and the moment of connection nearly slipped away. Marcus realized that trying to force Blaze would be futile. Instead, he knelt in the mud, lowering himself to the horse's level, just as he had during their training. "You don't have to fear anymore, boy," he said softly, his voice laden with emotion. The stillness was shattered by the distant roar of a helicopter passing overhead. Blaze froze, ears shot forward, and the wild spark that had been absent in his eyes flared momentarily. Marcus sensed the shift in the air, as if he were transported back to the battlefield. He knew what was happening. Blaze was reliving the sound of the helicopter, a potent trigger for a vivid memory. Marcus remained steady, watching as Blaze trembled, muscles tensing, his neighing growing louder than ever before. The horse began to circle the pen, tail lashing from side to side, as if preparing to flee or fight. Emma rushed to the fence, eyes wide with concern. "He's losing it." "Marcus, do something," she cried out. But Marcus raised his hand, signaling her to stay back. "Blaze, listen to me," he called, his voice firm yet urgent. He walked toward the center of the pen, arms open in a calming gesture. Every step felt risky, but he pressed on. "You're safe now. It's over, boy. It's over." His tone was resolute but gentle. For a moment, Blaze paused. The horse panted heavily, chest heaving as if the weight of his memories was overwhelming him. Then something shifted. Blaze lifted his head and met Marcus's gaze, eyes reflecting a mix of confusion and recognition. He took another step, then another, until he stood directly in front of Marcus. The man reached out, fingers trembling, and gently touched Blaze's forehead. "We're in this together," Marcus whispered. In that instant, he realized he wasn't just helping Blaze heal, he was confronting his own ghosts. Blaze didn't recoil from the touch. It was a fleeting moment, but one filled with profound meaning, an encounter where two survivors, marked by the same invisible wounds, finally reconnected. Marcus stood still, his hand resting on Blaze's forehead, feeling the warmth and life beneath the horse's scarred coat. "Blaze, your breathing is steadier," he murmured. "You remember me, don't you?" His voice was a blend of hope and anguish, but he knew that this newfound connection wasn't enough to erase the years of shared suffering. Blaze was like a mirror, reflecting the traumas Marcus had spent his life trying to bury. Yet, looking at the horse, he understood that he couldn't escape anymore. Emma, heart racing, took a few hesitant steps toward the fence. "I've never witnessed anything like this," she whispered. "How do you do it?" "He rarely lets anyone get close, and now." Her voice trailed off as she struggled to articulate what she was seeing. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He withdrew his hand from Blaze and took a few steps back, giving the horse space to choose his next move. "It's not magic," he finally said, maintaining his gaze on Blaze. "It's pain. Pain connects us in ways people don't understand. He knows I carry something just like he does." Blaze began to move slowly around the pen, his movements calm rather than frantic or panicked. Marcus watched each step, searching for signs of what to do next. Suddenly, he noticed a slight limp in Blaze's gait. Something was physically wrong. The horse was favoring his hind leg, and Marcus frowned. "He's hurt," he said, turning to Emma. "This kind of pain isn't just emotional. He's carrying something in his body, too." Emma nodded, concern etched on her face. "I'll call the vet," she offered swiftly, but Marcus waved her off with a gesture.
"No.
"Let me handle it. If he truly recognizes me, then I'm the one he will trust." Emma hesitated but saw the sincerity in Marcus's eyes and nodded subtly before stepping away, leaving the two alone once more. Marcus knew he was dealing with more than just physical injuries. Blaze was a complex puzzle, a wounded soul needing time, patience, and most importantly, redemption. Taking a deep breath, he prepared for the next step, fully aware that healing the horse would also require him to confront the parts of himself he had long avoided. He ran his hands along his head, attempting to steady his thoughts as he observed Blaze's struggle to move around the pen. The limp in Blaze's leg was becoming more pronounced, each step a struggle. Marcus understood that physical pain, much like emotional pain, could be devastating, especially for an animal like Blaze, trained to endure anything without hesitation. But he also knew that no one, not even a battle-hardened horse, was invincible. He grabbed a bucket of clean water and a cloth, slowly re-entering the pen. Blaze stopped, ears flicking back in alertness, but he didn't retreat as he had before. "It's okay, boy," Marcus said in a soothing, low tone, kneeling beside the horse. "I'm not going to hurt you." Carefully, he wiped the cloth across Blaze's hind leg, searching for signs of injury. When he touched a more sensitive area, Blaze let out a loud neigh and stepped aside, nearly striking Marcus with his hoof. I know," Marcus murmured, pulling back just enough to avoid startling him. "It hurts, but we need to fix this." He felt a disturbing familiarity in Blaze's reaction. During the war, there had been moments when Marcus had recoiled from the touch of a medic or a friend, the trauma making even care feel unbearable. Now he saw the same reflection in Blaze. As he worked carefully, Marcus began to speak, not directly to Blaze, but to himself and the surrounding emptiness. "I should have come back for you," he confessed, his voice heavy with guilt. "I should have fought harder to get you out of that place, but I was broken, kid. I was just trying to survive." He paused, swallowing hard as painful memories flooded his mind. "They said you had disappeared, that they couldn't find you amidst the chaos. I believed them because it was easier than admitting that maybe I could have done more." Blaze lowered his head slightly, eyes shining as if something in Marcus's words resonated. Marcus stood up, taking a deep breath. "But I'm here now," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "We're going to fix this. You've saved me so many times, Blaze. Now it's my turn to save you." After several minutes, Marcus was able to examine Blaze's hoof more closely. There was a slight swelling, perhaps from an old injury that had never been properly treated. He knew it would require time and patience, but healing was possible. Once he finished, he gently stroked Blaze's neck. This time, Blaze didn't pull away. It was a small gesture, but to Marcus, it meant everything. The sunset bathed the sky in warm hues as Marcus watched Blaze from outside the enclosure. The horse was calmer, his movements less hesitant, yet an emotional distance still lingered, seeming insurmountable. Marcus felt the weight of this barrier and understood that overcoming it wouldn't be easy. He slipped one hand into his pocket, feeling the small metal bell he had found among his old belongings. That object had symbolized survival for both of them during tough times, and he hoped it could now represent reconnection. Emma, nearby gathering hay, noticed Marcus's contemplative expression and approached him. "Are you all right?" she asked, offering a shy smile. He nodded slowly, but didn't look away from Blaze. "It's strange," he replied, "being so close to him, and yet feeling like we're worlds apart." Emma placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder, providing silent support. "Why does he mean so much to you?" she inquired, curious yet cautious. Marcus took a deep breath before answering. Because he saved my life, not just once, but several times, and I promised I would never leave him behind. His voice carried a weight that Emma hadn't anticipated. She realized that the bond between them was deeper than anyone could fathom. As they conversed, Blaze approached the fence, watching Marcus with cautious curiosity. It was a subtle but significant movement. Emma smiled as she observed. "I think he's starting to trust again," she said, attempting to inject a note of optimism into the conversation. Marcus nodded, but his eyes revealed his understanding that the journey ahead would still be arduous. The following morning at dawn, Marcus walked to the enclosure with the bell in his hand. He gently shook it, producing a metallic sound that resonated through the air. Blaze lifted his head, ears twitching as he picked up the familiar sound. Slowly, he took a few steps toward Marcus, eyes gleaming with a mix of recognition and caution. It was a fleeting moment, but it reignited Marcus's hope. "You remember this, don't you, boy?" Marcus whispered, trying to contain the emotion in his voice. He knew that this simple gesture meant more than it appeared. The bell was a reminder of the days when their trust was unbreakable. Now it was a promise that they could rebuild that trust together. The silence in the old training ground was profound, broken only by the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Marcus remained still as Blaze explored the area, each step echoing like a distant memory of the past. The training yard had been overtaken by vegetation and time, rendering it unrecognizable, but there was an undeniable sense of shared memory that seemed to pulse between them. For Blaze, the place awakened something long dormant. For Marcus, it was an opportunity to finally confront what he had been avoiding. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small metal bell. He shook it, its sound reverberating through the air like a familiar melody steeped in history. Blaze froze, ears perking up instantly. His eyes locked onto the bell, and he took a tentative step forward, hesitant. "You remember this, don't you, boy?" Marcus whispered, feeling his throat tighten. The bell symbolized the moments when they had trusted each other to survive. Now it served as a reminder that they could still heal together. Blaze moved closer, almost touching Marcus with his nose, a small gesture, yet profoundly meaningful. Marcus let the bell drop to the ground, its sound muffled against the earth. "I left you behind, Blaze," he confessed, his voice low and trembling. "I thought I was doing the right thing, that you'd be safe without me. But the truth is, I was scared of facing everything we lost." He took a deep breath, struggling to release the words. "But I'm here now, and we can move forward together." Blaze lifted his head, gaze meeting Marcus's. It was as if, in that moment, an invisible barrier shattered. The horse gave a soft neigh, a sound Marcus recognized as acceptance. He reached out and touched Blaze's forehead, feeling the connection he had feared was lost forever. A profound sense of relief washed over him, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt a clear path ahead. Emma arrived shortly after, observing the scene from a distance. She said nothing, merely standing there with a serene smile on her face. She understood that something profound had changed, something beyond explanation. Marcus and Blaze had found each other once more and, in doing so, had rediscovered the hope they had lost. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the field, Marcus and Blaze walked together across the landscape, just as they had in the old days. It wasn't merely a walk, it symbolized a new beginning. The past couldn't be undone, but they had chosen not to be prisoners of it. In their shared silence, they discovered something far more valuable than memories, the strength to move forward together.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.